Yes, my name is Cliff Purvis, former British Army Corporal. I did 24 years in the Army, 14 years with the Queens Own Highlanders and 10 years with the Royal Army Medical Corps.
You mentioned the boys that got hit with the landmine when they burst over it. Did that influence you at all when you switched to joining the medical? Was there anything about that that came back to you at the time and thought, that's something I'd maybe like to do?
I thought, after it, I thought, well, I've actually done not too bad there. As a regimental medic class 3, I was allowed to issue a plaster, heavily supervised, I think. So I thought, well, I actually got my head around that quite well. So yeah, it did. I then went away and did some other stuff. But then when the opportunity came, when I was given the opportunity to join the medical section, I thought, yeah.
So army medics might have to deal with somebody that's in a frenzied state. How do you manage to stay calm in the face of somebody that's maybe screaming for their life on the field?
Training, basically. Watching how other people have done it. And getting back to what I said about what happened in the Falklands with the medical sergeant there, he had also been at, I'm sure he was at Warren Point. Right, so I was watching him that day, seeing what he was doing. I learned a heck of a lot from him. You tend not, you are obviously situation aware. If you're not situation aware, you're a liability. So, but moving towards casualties, you tend to move towards casualties when it's safe to do so. Yes, I know that the Royal Army Medical Corps has the highest number of Victoria Crosses of any corps in the British Army, but and there are a lot of brave people that have worn this cap badge. But yeah, you tend to do it in a controlled manner to get to them, because if you become a casualty yourself, you're doing no use to yourself, you're doing no use to the casualty there, and the guys and girls that have got to help you, are not overly, would not be overly impressed with you. I considered myself sort of very well trained. So what other people might think of as being a challenge, we thought, I would always thought, well, I've been trained for this. You volunteered in some cases for this, so let's get it done. I mean, challenging, covering X amount of ground in X amount of time, I would consider that a challenge, absolutely, and a sense of achievement when it's done. But dealing with the situations as and when they pop up, well, again, it goes back to this thing about the training, and I've been very fortunate that I have had some outstanding people train me. And I've hoisted on board what they've tried to impart.
So, have you ever sat there after the fact then and reflected on it and think, how the hell did we get through that?
Yeah, that's a better question, I think. Yeah, because everybody does that, and if you don't do that, then there's something seriously wrong with you. Yeah, the Bosnia '93, most days, that I still maintain that was the toughest tour I have ever done. And that was again part of the UN deployment to there, but there were days there that we used to come in, and you look at the side of the vehicles. Okay, we're in armoured vehicles, right? But there'd be gouge marks on the side of them from where the locals have been popping off shots at you, and we eventually gave up using their tracked ambulances because they were quite literally using the Red Cross as an aiming mark. And you're sitting there, I'm trying to help people here. So yeah, there have been days when you get back in and you sit there and you think, yeah, how the heck did I get through that one? But you then get up the next day and you go back out again.
So that brings me to this question then. Medics seem to be quite respected even amongst enemy soldiers. However, the risk of running onto the field to recover injured comrades isn't without danger. So obviously we mentioned that you do it stage by stage. Could you give us a sort of example how that would happen? Do the enemy soldiers tend to give way sometimes for medical?
I've never come across that. No. Never come across
That's
it.
just a movie thing, is it?
Yeah. I know from the guys and girls who've been out in the Afghan and stuff. The whole thing about the Geneva Conventions, yeah, is they only apply to those that have ratified them. Right? And unfortunately, most of our opposition haven't ratified. They don't care about the Geneva Conventions. Even the Warsaw Pact countries. If you've ever read any books from any of the sort of people that have come over to the West, they don't get to hear about this Geneva Convention type of thing. So, yeah, it's very much a movie thing, that.
Right. So training people in certain roles, obviously, especially the front line, can be quite tough. Have you ever come across anybody that's come along and thought they knew better than you and got themselves in trouble because of it? And can you talk about that?
Not so much as they got themselves in trouble, but they had a bit of a hard time understanding that I actually did know what I was talking about. So then it got sorted out. And what you usually find, if you have deployed and somebody new comes in, then they will listen to you. If you're about to deploy, they will always defer to experience. So it's usually the weeks leading up to that the people realise, they begin to realise that I need to listen to these people. One particular incident, again in Bosnia, I had 4 hours notice to move for Bosnia. The corporal that should have gone out didn't, so I was stepped up to go out. So I didn't know the guys I was going out with. I knew them in the bar, but I hadn't trained with them. And we were out in a place called Gornje Vakuf to begin with, which is central Bosnia. And then we had to move up to Tuzla, which is up in northern Bosnia, and wasn't the best place in the world to be. But I had to get across to my guys, the 3 guys that were coming up with me, that I did actually know what I was talking about, and I needed them to work for me. So we were moving up, and it was a 3-vehicle convoy. Yeah, 3 vehicles. They had 2 fuel Bowsers, fuel wagons, and a Land Rover, and it was a fuel wagon, Land Rover, fuel wagon. So I popped myself in the lead wagon, and halfway up we had a break, and 2 of the young guys came out the Land Rover, and they were shoehorned in. It was that much kit that was in there. They came out moaning about this, and then they realised that they really had nothing to moan about because they were in the Land Rover. I was sitting on 45,000 litres of fuel or whatever was in it. But I never then had any problems. If I said, right, you're out in this patrol or doing this or doing that, it was straight away no problem at all.
You mentioned Bosnia a lot. Is there anything about that location, any experiences that you'd like to share with us that keeps it fresh in your head?
Well, I mentioned Bosnia because it was all things and everything. It started off as a wonderful sunshine tour. There was no shooting going on. The locals were very, very friendly. Everything out there is done with a drink. So Slipovic, the locally produced stuff. If you don't want to drink it, you can run your car off it, type of thing. And then it all went horribly wrong again. What's termed as the Second Battle of Gornje Vakuf kicked off, and then it just went, well, let's put it this way, there's absolutely nothing civil about a civil war. And the sights that the medics had to endure out there will live with us all forever. You just think, is there no end to the depravity that some of them can think up? Well, apparently there's not. So that is why I keep mentioning it. And also the group that went out there, we are still close. That was 93, so even after all this time, we still chat to each other and reminisce the good points. Of course, you were rotating as well. You ended up down in Split, and Split had, which was obviously in Croatia. It used to be part of the Yugo tour scene, the holiday. So I mean, it was like you're just transiting into a totally different area altogether. And I remember when we came down from Tuzla in particular, 2 of us. We didn't quite make it in time in the convoy to get into the barracks we should have been going into. So we stayed with the transport people, and it was literally sitting, me and this other guy were sitting out on the jetty watching crystal clear sky, wonderful warm sunny night, allowed to drink as much beer as we could consume. And the sergeant major of the camp says, "Look, there's no problem as long as there's no problem." So we even fell asleep outside under the stars that night. Absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, that's I mentioned that one. It was certainly the hardest 6 months I've ever worked. I mean, the Gulf War, the 4 days of the land war, was very intense, and I don't remember sleeping during that 4 days, but which is a complete false memory because obviously we were moving, so I would have used that opportunity to sleep. But we were working at night and moving through the day, like. So that 4 days were very intense as well. But one of the happiest memories I've got of the Gulf War is that everybody that got to us alive left us alive. Yeah, and that was some bloody hard work done on that one as well. How do you adjust mid-tour, as it is, from suddenly being 24-hour alert to suddenly being able to have a beer, sit down, watch the telly, and chill out and relax type of thing? It is incredibly difficult. It's very, very difficult. When I first started, the R&R from Northern Ireland was 4 days. And we were literally bussed helicopter out of Forkhill to Besbrook, and then from Besbrook up to Aldergrove Airport, and then across to Glasgow, and then up to Thurso. Yeah, and that suddenly the transition was just horrendous. It then went to was it a week? I think it was a week or 2 weeks we had for the last tour I did. The last 6 month tour I did. I'm not sure it was a 2 week R&R we had from West Belfast there. But yeah, it is difficult. And what the army, sorry, what the forces are doing now, certainly with when Afghanistan was ongoing, they were taking the guys and girls out once their tour was finished, putting them into Cyprus for 4 or 5 days decompression, and it was basically trying to clear the head then before they got home, because they realised coming straight out of that, and let's face it, Afghanistan was described to me by someone who'd been out there as you spend 6 months in a low density minefield with all that pressure that builds on. Yeah. So yeah, that and they were just sending them home straight away and realising that there were issues. So they then started this decompression, as they called it, before they then got home. So it's not an ideal solution, but it's better than just starting from scratch. Do you find yourself still carrying out one or two things you'd be doing whilst on patrol? Yes, you would. Yeah, I suppose the classic one that most of us who've served in Northern Ireland have reacted to in whatever way would be the screech of tires. Yeah, what's going on? Even if it's just a snap round of the head to see what's going on. But yeah, so yes.
Does that ever leave you, or do you always kind of carry that, even now?
I think it leaves after time is a good healer.
Sort of towards the end of your career, you mentioned you were over in Kenya.
Yes, I did a couple of exercises in Kenya.
So how was it being the medical for the medical stuff for the Gurkhas?
Oh, that was highly fun. Basically, I was at Glencorse Barracks at the medical centre there when Glencorse was still a recruit depot. And the senior medical officer in Scotland, a wonderful man, absolutely fantastic gentleman. His wife was one of the local doctors, so she was my boss effectively at Glencorse. So got on incredibly well with both Sarah and Niall, and he had seen fit to put me out to the Isle of Man to cover the Grand Prix bike racing for 2 weeks for 3 consecutive years. So I did owe him one when he phoned up and says, I need a favour of you. He says, I'd like you to go out with the Gurkhas as their company medic. I was probably the oldest combat medic in Scotland at the time, is certainly one of the unfittest. And he was putting me out with probably one of the most fittest rifle companies in the British Army. But the Gurkhas are an absolute pleasure to work with. They really are. I was accepted. They made allowance. I don't particularly like spicy food, but they made allowances for that, and I was given my own stuff. Made sure that I was given it. It was absolutely fantastic.
Was there anything about the Gurkhas then that really stood out, that just surprised you?
No, because I think everybody that has any sort of ounce of brain about them knows that they're a highly professional group of people. I think the one thing that I was ashamed of was their pay scales. I wasn't quite so aware of that they weren't paid the same as the rest of the British Army, even though they were doing exactly the same job. And the excuse used was that they couldn't flood Nepal with extra money, and that was the excuse by Whitehall to justify that. But it was absolutely scandalous. But yeah, so no, they were, I think, everything that I expected them to be, which was incredibly professional people, and they knew how to have a laugh as well.